Hi, I'm Tom King. I'm the founder and CEO of Toolkit.law, your global legal partner for the 80 plus countries with English-based legal systems, joined by our webinar director, Gigi Khan, out of Pakistan, out of our Pakistan office. Gigi, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
We are here today with Andrew Bright, the CEO of LimestoneDX, and Kirk Rittenberry, the Director of Sales of LimestoneDX. Many of the people, Andrew, who will be watching this will be legal professionals, but others will be people with a technical background. Could you please, for their benefit, because the lawyers, it's going to go right over our heads, but for people in the industry, they would really appreciate, Andrew, to know your technical background in this area. Could you share that?
My own experience here. So I've been in I've been in the entrepreneurial science space for over 15 years and in the diagnostic testing space for about a decade now. And the goal has always been to take new and innovative diagnostic tests and drive them into the market to tackle real problems in clinical and other forensic-based testing. So here it is, we're doing human-based testing, trying to give you results that are actionable for you.
In your
And
academic background?
so I have a PhD from the University of California, San Diego, and my undergraduate degree is from Princeton University. And I've done many things from infectious disease to cancer research, and then, like I said, for the last decade, devoted myself more to the diagnostic space, really combining during the pandemic, combining my infectious disease background with diagnostic testing, running the COVID, basically the main COVID lab for the state of Kentucky here in the U.S.
And am I correct that you have a very special certification within the industry?
Which do you know which one are you
No, the one
referring?
that impressed Bruce Jeffries of National Screening Center.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, seldom in the toxicology space, especially the production toxicology space, will you have full bore PhDs developing it out that way. And then from a certification standpoint, all of our labs are CLIA certified, giving us the ability to do both clinical and forensic based testing.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and open up the presentation that we're working on today. Um, Oral versus urine testing. So for Gigi, who's a family law attorney in Pakistan, for me, I'm a family law attorney in the United States. I also was a former prosecutor, and substance abuse testing is important for corporations, but also for the legal world. And we're here to work on this great help sheet that's part of the Toolkit.law CLE webinar bundle, help sheet bundle. Let's take these columns one at a time. We're going to cover oral versus urine testing, and I'm going to quickly start my timer that I forgot to start. There we go. Okay. Let's talk about oral testing pros and cons. Kirk, when you talk to testing labs, to collection locations, and to legal professionals, what do they need to know about oral testing pros and cons?
So the biggest thing is that obviously, and we say this often clinically as well, that a lot of the issues that you have with collecting urine from whether it's patients or inmates or folks that are a part of the legal system for whatever reason, the issues from the waist down go away. I know that you guys will know what that means because most of the issues surrounding collecting urine are where you run into issues not only clinically, but also I'm sure in your all space, because that's where sometimes you have the person cry foul or whatever the case may be. And typically because of the issues surrounding that, they usually will defer to the said person. So the biggest advantage is it's 30 seconds. That's one big thing. The other big thing, as we mentioned, Tom, in the other webinars, we can do a number of different, if you had 5 folks come in and you had to collect 5 of these, you could hand every person the tube and you could collect all 5 folks at one time. Obviously with urine, you can't cram 5 people into a bathroom and observe them all use the bathroom. So the ease of use is the biggest thing, but also we find that clinically speaking, we have tons of patients who actually say, we want to use this. We don't want to go through the humiliation of being observed as well. So I would imagine all those would also hold true in this space.
Now, when we talk about the disadvantages of oral versus urine testing, I believe there's maybe about a difference of a 1-day window, how far it goes back, Andrew. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. So because in the oral fluid, we're directly sampling the blood cavity via the salivary glands. And so you are going, as your body metabolizes a particular drug substance, it will then be metabolized by the liver, grabbed by the kidneys, and dumped in the bladder. So that's going to move quicker out of the blood than it is out of the urine. So you lose about a day for some compounds. Honestly, for some compounds like methamphetamine, you actually pick up a couple days, but that gets into the weeds. So it's about about 6 hours to 72-hour detection window for oral fluid, and for urine, you can maybe get 1 to 4 days. So it comes up quicker and goes out quicker in the oral fluid, and it comes up a little bit later and goes out a little bit later in the urine. So it's a difference, right? We find, even though it is technically a disadvantage, we find that 90% of when we do our split oral urine collection, we find that they're 90% co-positive. So they are highly correlative in their ability to detect compounds that have been ingested by a person.
Let's talk about the methodology and the differences in collection there, Andrew.
Sure. So from a collection standpoint, we are doing a swish and spit. So it's an oral fluid rinse, which is in direct contrast to the oral fluids on the market, which are usually collect via a swab, which will passively collect drool or saliva over a 10-minute period. So that's the number one difference from the oral fluid. Compared to urine, though, as Kirk was mentioning, the use of oral fluids removes the need for specialized restroom facilities, removes the need for same-sex collectors. So you can a male or female can collect a male or female. And it also removes the need for what's called shy bladder procedures. So if someone says they can't urinate, you are usually, depending on your jurisdiction, legally required to give them X amount of time to urinate before they fail the test. That can be up to 4 hours. And so now you're running into additional costs.
I've never heard anybody say I can't spit.
Exactly. Well,
Right.
and if you can't spit, even better, because we have a citric acid in the tube that will help you generate saliva. So we see this clinically for some of our older individuals who have dry mouth from various different medical situations. They love this product because, one, they don't have to urinate, and two, the swab-based ones are absolutely atrocious for them, as you can imagine, putting a cotton ball in a mouth when you already have dry mouth. So there's no reason you can't do this test anywhere in front of a judge, on the side of the street, walking up the stairs. There's no reason not to give a drug test now.
So Gigi, with all of your family law clients in Islamabad, in the capital, no more excuses.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, usually the excuses come from people who have diseases like diabetes, right? They suffer from dry mouth a lot, and I guess I won't hear them complain anymore.
That's right. Well, and to add to that, Tom, a lot of times from a clinical perspective, this would also hold true in the judicial. If you have folks that have issues with hepatic or renal impairment, which is, the liver and the kidneys, they actually in many cases can't, for those issues. And so this takes away, as Taylor said, you don't have to wait 4 hours, to allow them to do that.
And that was a good catch on the diabetes, Gigi. So Andrew, everybody wants to know, is there a cheat, right? You go to, in the US, vape shops and smoke shops, and they'll sell things like a detox, a cleanse, some magic drink or potion that'll get rid of all that heroin you've been doing for 10 years in 10 minutes, right? So are there actual things to help cheat with urine or blood? And what's the susceptibility with saliva?
So any of the kind of the cleanses or the other compounds that are supposed to help you pass a urine test won't have any effect on this, because those compounds, usually what they're trying to do is they're trying to hyperhydrate you so that you will over urinate as to your normal. So you're clearing your system of that drug, or you're diluting it, right? Because if we've all seen someone comes and gives a drug test and it looks like a cup of water, right? Even if they didn't dip it in the toilet, which they oftentimes do, you may be so hydrated that your urine is mostly water in those cases, and we won't be able to find the drug. So on the oral fluid front, from a quick solve perspective, there's nothing that at the moment, I mean, people are very ingenious, but there's nothing at the moment that allows them to directly impact the test. And that is for a couple of reasons. So in the old days—
Well, what is your sensitivity is so high, right?
Cool. Well, correct. Yeah. So, in the old days of oral fluid, which is like 15 months ago, when it was swab based, there were a couple things that they would do. You would rinse your mouth with either hydrogen peroxide or Everclear or strong alcohols to essentially dry out the oral cavity. And because, as we talked about, with the ability of these swabs to actually just pick up passively saliva, if you dry that cavity out, it won't get any sample. Other things they'll do, they'll hold it between their teeth. The hydrogen peroxide can actually degrade some of the compounds and all this other nonsense.
Okay.
So those work against the swab-based methods, either directly impacting the compounds or directly impacting the way those tests run to identify the compounds. In contrast with Quicksol, as I mentioned, we're generating a new oral fluid sample every time you swish. So you can do whatever you want to clear out your oral cavity. When you use Quicksol, we're going to pull out from the salivary glands an active sample, which is directly next to the blood vessels. It's going to be a proxy for blood, and you spit that in, and we're going to have that sample no matter what you tried to do in the beginning. Now, if you then muck around with it once you spit in the tube, that's who knows what you're going to do. But from the point of if it's being properly observed and properly collected, there's nothing they can do beforehand. And if you're worried they have something silly in their mouth, like, smokeless tobacco, a mint, or something that they think is going to happen, even though it won't, you can just, have them rinse the oral cavity with clean water, wait 5 minutes, and do the test then. So, it's very, very difficult. Obviously, nothing's impossible in biology, but it's very difficult for someone to come in and go after this test because, again, you're directly observed. We're pulling a fresh sample every time you swish and spit, and our limits are so low.
Let's finish the green column on the right. Let's pick up with the chain of custody considerations, transport, and lab considerations.
Sure. So for oral fluid specifically, the point of chain of custody is that it's seamless to what you're doing now. Whatever you're collecting on, that will work, whether it be electronic or paper. That will work. Oral fluids will work just as well as urine. You seal the tube with the same tamper seal. With Quicksol, which is our product, you also have ability to do A/B split testing. So if you notice from a CCF, you have an A label and a B label. You can do that with Quicksol because it's a liquid, it's a neat solution that you can split into 2 samples. With the swabs, you can't. So a swab-based oral fluid, you might be doing dual collection, one on each side of the mouth, which is a really terrible process. But for the CCF form, our product works seamlessly with it. With transport,
Andrew, and that's actually a really important point because for those familiar with criminal law, let's say there's a DWI, a driving while intoxicated, that results in a homicide in some states, such as in the state that I'm in, the jurisdiction I'm in the United States, you're required to take 2 separate blood samples, right? One for the lab to send to the state or province, depending on where you live, and the other one you have to preserve for the defense attorney if they ever want to do their own independent testing. And if you lose or the chain of custody is broken on your B sample, they have to throw out the A sample.
Yep.
Yeah, Kirk, that's a really big thing. So in the state of Texas, you have to take 2 valid blood draws. You have to preserve the chain of custody for both. One must go to the testing lab for the state. The other one cannot, and it has to stay in the refrigerator at the location that took it, and you have to preserve it. So if your refrigerator breaks, or if you can say that they didn't, from the time that they cleaned the area with iodine and they didn't wait the minimum 15 minutes and document that in the chain of custody, and they drew it at 14 minutes and 52 seconds, that B sample is invalid and the A sample is as well. So the importance of the drawing of the 2 samples, Andrew, that's really important.
Yep.
Let's go back to the help sheet, and I'm going to let you finish up in the next 1 minute, the bottom left side of the help sheet here.
Yeah, so for transport, for our particular oral fluid product, Quicksol, we actually have a stabilizer that will drop the pH and limit bacterial growth. As you can imagine, once you swish your mouth, you're going to have all sorts of food particles and bacteria from the oral cavity. And so if you don't limit that ability to grow, it can overcome and contaminate the sample. But once that stabilizer is in there, it's room temperature stable for 7 days, so you can ship it off to the lab, and we don't have to do expensive overnight shipping.
Room temperature stable for 7 days?
Yeah, because again, once you prohibit the bacteria from growing, there's nothing in there really that's going to degrade those samples over time.
That's got to be an advantage over preservation of blood, right?
Oh
It's
yeah, I
a,
mean blood as a collection as a specimen is very difficult to work with. There's a reason here in the States there's a LabCorp and a Quest in every small city. Shipping blood any distance is a real mess,
Mhm.
especially whether it be whole blood or even serum separated blood. So one, while urine is usually a go-to fluid because it's a little more stable than blood. But here with oral fluid, we overcome not only the limitations of urine on the collection side, which we discussed at length earlier, but also the shipping issues of blood.
Mhm.
So interesting. Let's go ahead and shift to the second column. So spend about 5 minutes here. When it comes to oral testing, what do we need to know on
So
the result, on the testing results?
so the number one thing on the oral testing results as directly related to urine is that they're just going to look very different. And you need to understand that. And we provide lots of resources to help you not only understand the oral fluids themselves, but also in relation to the urine test that most of the individuals who are going to be, in these industries have seen. Most people have seen a urine test. It's been the standard up until this point. So the bladder, as I mentioned earlier, is inherently a concentrating organ, so you're going to find a lot more of the substance than you would in the oral fluid. So you're going to see numbers in the thousands for urine, and you're going to see numbers in the teens and the 20s for oral fluid. It's different. It doesn't mean that it's quote unquote lower. It's just a different type of test.
And is it in lawyers' simple thinking, is it because you're testing is at a far more minute level? You're detecting far lower, smaller samples?
Yes, correct. So again, the bladder is concentrating that urine, right? Also, when we're generating that saliva to have that quick and efficient sample collection, volume up, concentration down. So we're going to have a lower concentration than you would normally see in a swab-based oral fluid. But then with our improvements in our mass spectrometry testing and other lab stuff, we're able to go. That's why we've reduced our sensitivity limit down to 1 nanogram per mil.
But far more
Uh,
sensitivity to detect.
Correct, giving us the ability to detect even low levels and giving us that zero tolerance moniker in the oral fluid.
So what's a
Um,
disadvantage of oral fluid drug testing versus urine?
Well, so the disadvantage is kind of what I've been kind of explaining over the top of here, which is it's just different, right? It takes a little bit of understanding, a little bit of education. In the clinical space, we even pushback from doctors who have have been trained in this, but are just not used to seeing urine or oral fluids in comparison to urine. So it takes a little bit more effort, especially if you're used to seeing a urine where you have the metabolites higher than the parents, and that actually indicates some things called pill shaving and other sort of adulteration techniques. It looks the opposite in oral fluid, but again, you just a little bit of education, which we can provide resources on, really helps you overcome that.
And no doubt your submission, your intake process, if they choose, is online. When you get the results, it fully explains that within the context of the confines of this method of testing, right, Kirk?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. Right.
And for testing, so for Kirk, one of the things that I love that I saw that we covered actually in a different webinar that we recorded
Mhm.
was both your analog way of collecting, but also an online process that you can use, and for also dealing with the results, right, Kirk?
That's correct. Yeah, we can create a portal. And now, as you know, most of ours will probably go through the National Screening Center, Bruce Jeffries' entity. And I think they're already set up to have some of their customers choose the test, be able to go in and look at the portal. In some cases, and I think in Bruce's case, we're even discussing the possibility of where it's almost completely seamless. We have a printer that prints a little barcode, you scan the code. We've already received that information at the laboratory. So yes, it can be, as Taylor mentioned, either online, which can be very fluid, or we do keep paper because there are some people, believe it or not, that still do on or paper requisitions. But
Look,
yeah,
50% of
either way.
lawyers are still using WordPerfect.
And more than that, in the clinical world, are using paper still. So yes, absolutely.
Okay, continuing out, what do we need to know about the oral urine versus saliva when with personnel and collection considerations, Kirk?
So as we've sort of discussed, the biggest thing is you don't have to have a same-sex collector at this point. Again, that's something we see clinically. We have customers where they're able to either roll the folks that are doing the collection over into other duties because now you don't have that where you've got to take a woman back with a woman and so on and so forth. Another thing we see clinically also is if you are someone who's collecting this and you're a female, say, and a male patient comes in, obviously, you're not going to have a male go observe or a female go observe a male. So all of those things are big considerations. And then again, how quickly we can do it. We can do all this in 30 seconds right now in front of God and everybody. Whereas we tested this. This may be off topic a little bit. We've tested this with several units of the Army National Guard, and it takes them 4.5 days to collect a 400-man unit. And I think we sort of did the math, and we can do it in about 4.5 hours.
No, my son in the United States Army, he's in charge of drug testing for the group of soldiers that he commands, and I can imagine reducing the amount. But I'm also thinking safety in prisons.
Yes.
When you don't need special rooms, and if you cut the amount of time of collection by 95% and exposing personnel to inmates, I got to think that safety concern. Or if it's in the military on a submarine, you don't need a special room.
Right. I mean,
right?
On the correction side, that's a big point that's been brought up. Not exposing the correction officers to unnecessary interactions with the inmate, and especially think about the interaction that you're exposing them to. It's not them pulling out of the cell, to go get exercise. It's removing the individual from the cell to then have watched 3 or 4 other people watch them urinate. That's a high tension situation. And we were talking with a former probation officer here in Kentucky, and she noted that the number one area where altercations occurred was in the drug testing facility. You got your pants down around your knees, you're trying to pull out, they're like, oh, what are you doing with? So maybe something looks a little off, officer makes a move, now we got a situation on our hand that's just not necessary. Here, you can leave the individual in the cell, pass the thing through, they swish, give it back to you. If they spit it on you, that's obviously a violation, but it's there's non-toxic, there's no issue with it. You just wipe it off and move on with your day. It's far superior.
And as a point of note, because of the reasons Taylor just said, the Wisconsin Department of Corrections is actually trialing Quicksall as we speak for the reasons he just mentioned, and they're also going to use it for their parolees. So parole officer goes out and catches somebody, they can't say, oh, I just used the bathroom. No problem. Come out here on the steps. We get the test and we go on down the road. So,
I'm also thinking, because we keep mentioning national screening centers that facilitates all of our drug testing on 6 continents through Toolkit.law, and whenever there's local law enforcement that's involved in a shooting or a homicide or a motor vehicle accident, they have to do the testing right there on the scene.
And frankly, right now we're the only oral rinse where you could with certainty go to a scene like you're describing, give everybody there that's got to be tested a tube, test them all, and know for certain that at the point that you collected that, those whatever shows up in the systems within the system. So yeah, blood's difficult because you have to call somebody to get there, and then it's invasive because you've got to stick somebody and all that kind of stuff.
Andrew, let's cover the last 3 boxes on the right side before we flip to the back side of this excellent help sheet you put together on oral versus urine testing.
Sure. So on the results side, one of the more interesting things of oral fluid is specifically revolves around cannabis. So in oral fluid, and this is all oral fluids, not just Quicksall, but in oral fluids, you're looking at the psychoactive form of THC, meaning that's the form in the blood that will bind the brain and make you inebriated. In contrast to the urine, you are looking directly at a metabolite that could have been, metabolized and stored in the fat for weeks, right? So certain jurisdictions in the U.S., specifically the state of California and the state of Washington, have actually prohibited the use of urine testing for THC in the workplace. And this is leading to a big, discussion over, well, I get that we have recreational cannabis business that we want to support, but, I still have an incentive to make sure that my forklift driver is not inebriated because of use of a cannabis product on the way into work. And so with oral fluid, specifically like Quicksall, you're actually able to detect the psychoactive level of THC, and then that paired with some sort of report of either impaired behavior or inebriation can be used, as a valid workplace testing methodology.
Great.
It's very similar.
Let's go to the second. No, sorry. Finish your thought.
So it's very similar to roadside, where you have the idea of someone's inebriated, and then you have the BAC to show there's alcohol in there, and you put two and two together.
Great. We're now we should now be looking at the second half of this great help sheet that LimestoneDX put together for us. So when it comes to urine testing, what are the pros and cons, Andrew?
So the main pro from the urine testing in the legal judicial space is precedent, right? There's years of built up understanding of what a urine drug test means, how to interpret it. DAs, defense attorneys, judges, everyone's a little more comfortable with it, and there is precedent. So that's the number one pro for urine. Obviously, the cons of what we've kind of been talking about vis-a-vis the oral fluid above is collection. It can be a real difficult situation.
Okay, and then when it comes to disadvantages of urine,
so mainly it's the observed urination is the main issue. So having to watch someone urinate is the number one issue there, with the issues of shy bladder and other things that we've talked about in the past also coming in there. The oral fluid is just a much easier specimen to collect.
urine goes back about 4 days, saliva goes back about 3, right?
That's correct.
But you get far greater sensitivity with the saliva testing. So it would seem to me that the trade-off is a no-brainer.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, the trade-off there, especially with the collection and with oral fluids, there's no substitute oral fluid or adulteration. So as I always like to say, the look back period for fake urine is 0 days, right? Everyone gets kind of hung up on this small difference between look back periods. If you have a fake urine, or you have adulterated urine, or you have your cousin's urine, the look back period of that is 0 days. So here we're getting a valid sample from the individual, which will give us, let us know what that person has ingested within somewhere between the last 6 to 72 hours.
So obviously with Kirk, when it comes to personnel considerations and office space considerations, with urine, you have personnel that you have to, it's a less desirable job. Therefore, you have to train them, and you have to pay more, and you have to have separate facilities in the building to accommodate urine testing.
Correct. And quite frankly, unless you have somebody that's collected urine for some period of time before, they may not even know what to look for, in terms of how people are trying to beat the test, pill shaving, bringing in fake urine, bringing in fake apparatuses, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, y'all said pill shaving twice. What's that mean? What's pill shaving? What's pill shaving?
Well, and this brings up a great point too. The point of care cups, you see the cups where they collect urine and they have the strips on the side, and so if you take one of those cups and you scrape a pill, if you had a pill, you scrape it, let's say it's an OxyContin, it's going to probably pop positive for OxyContin because you're literally putting the substance straight into the urine, right? Mm-hmm. And those cups, if you look at the package insert on those cups, they tell you in the package insert that those cups are only accurate about 40 to 60% of the time. No one would ever make a clinical decision based upon those cups. That's why laboratories like us exist, because confirmation is the end all be all. If it's run on the LCMS machine, those cups are terrible. So
the plastic collection cups of urine is only successful 40 to 60% of the time.
Correct. And there's false positives that you have in there because of things like, what is it, Taylor? Sudafed and things. They'll come positive for, exactly.
No wonder all of Gigi's clients are getting off.
Yeah. And listen, to your point, if I'm a defense attorney, the first thing, knowing what I know about laboratory, the first thing I'm attacking is the accuracy of the cup. And then if it was urine, I'm attacking other things because of what I know clinically. So yeah, absolutely. With this, and DAs are probably, not DAs, defense attorneys at the beginning, at least, are probably not going to like this very much because they can't use any of the old standard excuses for why my client can't go. Oh, listen, we can do it right here. We don't have to go to a bathroom. Nobody's ever going to say, I can't produce saliva. And even if they said hey, no problem, we can produce it for you because the solution has saliva stimulating agents in it. So yeah, all of those things.
So let's talk, Andrew, with regard to urine, regarding what do we need to know about chain and custody and transport as opposed to saliva.
So chain of custody is, again, much more well-established for urine. And so that's going to be whatever normal process you're doing now. The main issue there is you can do that with oral fluid. And chain of custody, just like the precedent, is well established in urine. Here in the U.S., the federal government has had established protocols for urine testing since the early 90s. So that's well established. Transport for urine, one of the major issues with transport for urine is you're collecting a lot of fluid, and it's in a cup, and it spills all the time. Getting urine back to the lab is much more difficult than it should be, especially when you're, if you're in a non-clinical setting, when you're more of a forensic setting. So if that urine spills in transit, that test is immediately invalid. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to reject it. Not only that, I have to figure out what to do with a bag of pee. So the transport with urine is very very suboptimal, I'll call it. And
Makes
then
sense.
from the lab side, again, urine testing is very well established on the lab side. The limits can be quite high depending on how the lab wants to approach themselves. And on the urine side, often you get stuck with what they call presumptive tests. So tests that are run with a different methodology that are very quick and very cheap, but really don't give you any real information. So if you're looking at urine testing, you really do know, am I getting a definitive test, an actual answer to my question, is this person ingesting drugs, or am I getting a presumptive test? If you're paying less than $40, you're probably getting a presumptive test.
If you're using urine.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
but if you're using saliva.
Well, if you're using saliva, specifically using our product, QuickSol, we only run a definitive test on it because we go so low on the limits. We have to use the big machines right out the bat. So from there, we are getting that full confirmation from about 2 mils of spit as you would from a whole cup of urine.
Kirk, we've already talked about the advantages of urine because, people know about it. And it's been around so long, even a lawyer kind of knows how to read the results, right? Mm-hmm. But let's talk about, when we talk about urine test results, let's talk about the methodology. Is there anything you'd like to share there?
In terms of methodology of collection or how we
of the testing results?
The results.
So the results, I don't know if there's a lot that I personally would be sharing. As Taylor has mentioned, I think what we see the biggest, I don't say detriment, is the education of looking at a urine drug screen test and the results for an oral, a QuickSol test. It's the cutoff levels aren't different. As he's mentioned, we drop down to 1 nanogram per milliliter. But if you're someone that reads these with any regularity, you're going to immediately see that with QuickSol, the big advantage is we can do it like urine does it, in the sense that we can show parent drug metabolite, we can do cutoff levels, look back times, all that kind of stuff. Any other oral that's out there right now does not, you can't get parent drug and metabolite. Usually you'll see parent drug positive or negative, and that's it. Does that make sense?
It does. So we've been talking about oral versus urine drug testing for the legal world here in this CLE continuing legal education event. We've been joined by Andrew Bright, the CEO, and Kirk Rittenberry, the Director of Sales for LimestoneDX. If you have more questions, you can go to LimestoneDX.com. Thank you and goodbye.